Welcome to channel subscribe healing story. The sound of shattering glass echoed through the restaurant as Marcus stood frozen, staring at his boss and the woman he'd loved in secret for years. Their lips had just parted from a kiss that destroyed everything he thought he knew. If you're wondering how a simple act of kindness led to the most devastating moment of this single father's life, stay with me until the end. This story of sacrifice, betrayal, and unexpected redemption might just change how you see the people closest to you. If this resonates with you, please consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel for more powerful stories that reflect the complicated reality of modern relationships. Marcus Collins wiped the sweat from his brow as he balanced his phone between his ear and shoulder, listening to his 8-year-old daughter Emma's excited chatter about her day at school while simultaneously trying to finish the quarterly report his boss needed by morning. "And then Lily said I could come to her birthday party on Saturday, Dad. Can I go? Please?" Emma's voice bubbled with excitement. "Of course, sweetheart," Marcus replied, glancing at his watch. It was already 7:30 p.m., and he still had hours of work ahead. "We'll pick up a present this week." "You're the best dad ever," Emma exclaimed before passing the phone back to Marcus's mother, who had been watching her while he worked late, again. "Don't push yourself too hard, son," his mother cautioned. "Emma needs you healthy." "I know, Mom. I'll be home as soon as I can. Thank you for watching her." After hanging up, Marcus rubbed his tired eyes and returned to the spreadsheets on his computer screen. 3 years had passed since Vanessa, his wife, had died in a car accident, leaving him to raise Emma alone. The grief had nearly broken him, but his daughter needed him, so he'd somehow found the strength to keep going. His salvation had come in the form of a job at Horizon Investments, where his boss, Richard Harrington, had shown him unexpected compassion. Richard had given him flexible hours, understood when childcare emergencies arose, and even offered him this promotion 6 months ago, the one that now kept him working late into the night but finally provided enough financial stability for him and Emma. And then there was Claire Bennett, the company's marketing director. With her warm smile and kind eyes, she'd been the first person to make Marcus feel something beyond grief since Vanessa's death. They'd developed a friendship over shared lunches and coffee breaks, and though Marcus had never found the courage to tell her how he felt, her presence in his life had become a quiet source of hope. A knock on his office door interrupted his thoughts. "Still burning the midnight oil, I see," Richard said, leaning against the doorframe. At 45, Richard was only 10 years older than Marcus but carried himself with the confidence of someone who had built a successful company from nothing. His tailored suit and perfectly styled salt and pepper hair contrasted sharply with Marcus's rumpled shirt and loosened tie. "Just finishing up the Westfield report," Marcus replied, stifling a yawn. Richard nodded approvingly. "That's why you're my right-hand man. Listen, I need a favor." "Of course," Marcus said immediately. He owed Richard too much to ever say no. "I've got a blind date tomorrow night. My sister set it up, and I can't get out of it." Richard ran a hand through his hair, looking uncharacteristically nervous. "Thing is, I've heard this woman can be intense. I need an exit strategy." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "An exit strategy? I need you to call me about an hour into the dinner. If the date's going well, I'll ignore it. If not, it's my excuse to leave." Richard smiled sheepishly. "I know it's childish, but dating at my age is a nightmare." "No problem," Marcus said, though he couldn't help feeling a twinge of envy. His own dating life had been non-existent since Vanessa's death, with Emma and work consuming all his time and energy. "Great. We'll be at Bellini's at 8. Call around 9. Richard clapped him on the shoulder. "And go home soon. You look exhausted." After Richard left, Marcus turned back to his computer, but his mind wandered to Claire. Earlier that day, she'd stopped by his office with coffee, her fingers briefly touching his as she handed him the cup. The contact had sent a jolt through him, and for a moment, he'd thought he saw something in her eyes, something that mirrored his own feelings. But then Emma had called about a forgotten lunchbox, and the moment had passed. Maybe someday he'd find the courage to ask her out. But not yet. Not when the risk of rejection could make things awkward at work, the job he desperately needed for Emma's sake. The next evening, Marcus sat at his kitchen table helping Emma with her math homework when his phone alarm reminded him of Richard's call. He excused himself and stepped into the living room. "Dad, are you calling Mr. Richard?" Emma asked, following him. "Can I say hi?" Marcus smiled. Emma had met Richard several times at company picnics and had taken an immediate liking to him. "Not this time, sweetie. This is a work call." He dialed Richard's number, expecting a quick conversation, either a thank you for the interruption or a dismissal if the date was going well. What he didn't expect was for Richard to sound genuinely distressed. "Marcus, thank God. You need to help me." Richard's voice was hushed but urgent. "What's wrong?" Marcus asked, immediately concerned. "This woman is a nightmare. She spent the last hour talking about her ex-husband and how all men are trash. I need more than an excuse, I need a rescue." Marcus glanced at Emma, who was watching him with curious eyes. "I can't leave right now." "Emma." "Please," Richard interrupted. "I've never asked you for anything personal before. 20 minutes, that's all I need. Just come in, make up some emergency, and get me out of here." Marcus sighed, torn between his obligation to his boss and his responsibility as a father. "Let me see if my neighbor can watch Emma for a bit." After hanging up, he knelt beside his daughter. "Sweetie, Mr. Richard needs my help with something. Would it be okay if Mrs. Peterson came over to stay with you for a little while?" Emma's face fell slightly, but she nodded. "Is Mr. Richard okay?" "He's fine," Marcus assured her. "He just needs a little help getting out of a boring grown-up dinner." Thankfully, his elderly neighbor was home and happy to watch Emma. After settling them with a board game, Marcus drove to Bellini's, one of the most expensive restaurants in the city. He felt distinctly out of place in his jeans and casual shirt as the maitre d' led him through the dimly lit dining room. He spotted Richard at a corner table, sitting across from a woman with elaborately styled blonde hair. Richard's face lit up with relief when he saw Marcus approaching. "Marcus! What are you doing here?" Richard exclaimed with exaggerated surprise. "I'm sorry to interrupt, sir, but there's an emergency at the office," Marcus said, playing along. "The Westfield server crashed, and we need your authorization codes to restore the backup." Richard stood immediately, turning to his date. "I'm terribly sorry, Veronica. This is a critical client. I have to go." The woman's heavily made-up face twisted in annoyance. "Seriously? You're leaving in the middle of dinner?" "Business emergency," Richard said smoothly, already reaching for his wallet. He placed several bills on the table. "This should cover everything. Please, enjoy dessert on me." As they walked away, Marcus could feel Veronica's glare burning into his back. Once outside, Richard let out a long breath. "You're a lifesaver," he said, clapping Marcus on the shoulder. "That woman was a nightmare. My sister is officially banned from setting me up ever again." Marcus smiled, glad to have helped but anxious to get back to Emma. "Happy to help. I should get going." "No way," Richard interrupted. "You just saved me from the date from hell. Let me buy you a drink to say thanks." "I can't. My neighbor is watching Emma, and I promised I wouldn't be long." Richard checked his watch. "One quick drink. There's a bar around the corner. 15 minutes, tops." Marcus hesitated, but Richard was already walking toward his car. With a sigh, he followed, sending a quick text to Mrs. Peterson explaining he'd be a little longer than expected. The bar was upscale but comfortable, with leather booths and soft jazz playing in the background. They found a quiet corner, and Richard ordered scotch for both of them. To escapes, Richard said, raising his glass. Marcus smiled and took a small sip, planning to nurse the drink and leave as soon as possible. So, Richard said, leaning back in his seat, when are you going to ask Claire out? Marcus nearly choked on his drink. What? Richard laughed. Come on, it's obvious you're into her. And from what I can tell, she feels the same way. I don't, we're just friends, Marcus stammered, feeling heat rise to his face. Life's too short for just friends when there's clearly something more, Richard said, his expression growing serious. Take it from someone who's been playing it safe too long. When you find someone who makes you feel alive again, you shouldn't wait. Marcus stared into his glass, thinking of Claire's smile, the way she always remembered how he took his coffee, how she'd ask about Emma with genuine interest. It's complicated. I have Emma to think about. Emma deserves a happy father, Richard pointed out. And from what I've seen, Claire would be great with her. Before Marcus could respond, his phone buzzed with a text from Mrs. Peterson, Emma asking when you'll be home. Getting sleepy. I need to go, Marcus said, standing up. Thanks for the drink. Richard nodded understandingly. Think about what I said. And thanks again for the rescue. On the drive home, Marcus couldn't stop thinking about Claire. Maybe Richard was right. Maybe it was time to take a chance. The thought both terrified and exhilarated him. The next morning, Marcus arrived at work early, the quarterly report completed and a new determination in his heart. He would ask Claire to lunch today, not their usual cafeteria meeting, but a real lunch, away from the office. It wasn't quite a date, but it was a start. He was reviewing his presentation for the morning meeting when his office door opened, and Claire walked in. The sight of her, dark hair pulled back in a neat bun, green eyes bright, made his heart race. Morning, she said, placing a coffee on his desk. Thought you might need this after working late. Thanks, he replied, their fingers brushing as he took the cup. This time, he didn't look away from the contact. Actually, I was wondering if you'd like to grab lunch today. Not in the cafeteria, maybe that new place down the street? Something flickered across Claire's face, surprise, followed by what looked like regret. Oh, Marcus, I can't today. I have plans. No problem, he said quickly, trying to hide his disappointment. Another time. She hesitated, then nodded. We should get to the meeting. Richard wants to review the Westfield presentation. As they walked to the conference room, Marcus noticed Claire seemed unusually quiet. In the meeting, she sat across from him but barely met his eyes, focusing intently on her notes instead. Richard, on the other hand, was in an excellent mood, praising Marcus's report and announcing that the Westfield account was now officially their biggest client. This calls for a celebration, he declared. Drinks after work, everyone. The day passed in a blur of meetings and phone calls. By evening, most of the office had gathered at a nearby bar, the atmosphere festive with the success of the Westfield deal. Marcus had arranged for his mother to watch Emma for a few hours, deciding that a brief appearance at the celebration was important for his career. He was chatting with colleagues when he noticed Claire standing alone by the bar. Taking a deep breath, he made his way over to her. Not much of a celebration person, he asked, leaning against the bar beside her. She smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. Just tired. It's been a long week. I know what you mean. He hesitated, then added, listen, about lunch. Marcus, she interrupted, her voice soft but firm. I need to tell you something. The serious tone made his stomach tighten. What is it? Before she could answer, Richard appeared, slipping an arm around Claire's waist with casual intimacy. There you two are. What are we talking about? Marcus stared at Richard's arm, then at Claire's face, which had flushed pink. The realization hit him like a physical blow. You're together, he managed to ask, his voice sounding distant to his own ears. Richard beamed, pulling Claire closer. As of last night. I was going to tell you this morning, but with the Westfield presentation, there wasn't time. Last night? Marcus repeated, the pieces falling into place with sickening clarity. The blind date Richard had needed rescuing from, it had been a ruse. A way to meet Claire without arousing suspicion. Richard thought it would be fun to have a secret rendezvous, Claire explained, not quite meeting Marcus's eyes. He was worried about office gossip if people saw us together too soon. The glass Marcus had been holding slipped from his fingers, shattering on the floor. The sound seemed to echo through the bar, though in reality, it was barely audible over the music and conversation. Sorry, he mumbled, kneeling to pick up the larger pieces. A bartender quickly appeared with a broom, waving him away. When he straightened, Richard was looking at him with concern. You okay, buddy? You look pale. Fine, Marcus said automatically. Just remembered I promised Emma I wouldn't be late. Congratulations to both of you. He turned and walked out of the bar before either of them could respond, the cool night air hitting his face like a slap. In his car, he gripped the steering wheel until his knuckles turned white, fighting back the wave of emotions threatening to overwhelm him. Richard had known. He'd known how Marcus felt about Claire, had even encouraged him that very night to pursue her, all while planning his own secret date with her. And Claire, had she known how Marcus felt? Had she been trying to let him down gently that morning when he'd asked her to lunch? The betrayal cut deep, not just because of his feelings for Claire, but because of what he'd thought was a genuine friendship with Richard. The man who had seemed to understand his struggles as a single parent, who had given him opportunities when he needed them most, had used him as a pawn in his romantic games. For the next week, Marcus threw himself into his work, avoiding both Richard and Claire whenever possible. He arrived early, left late, and ate lunch at his desk. When interactions were unavoidable, he was professionally cordial but distant. Emma noticed the change in him. Are you sad, Daddy? She asked one evening as they ate dinner. Marcus forced a smile. Just tired, sweetheart. Work is busy right now. Is it because of Mr. Richard? You don't talk about him anymore. Children's perceptiveness never ceased to amaze him. Mr. Richard and I had a disagreement. But it's nothing for you to worry about. Emma considered this, then said with the simple wisdom of childhood, when Lily and I fight, my teacher says we should talk about our feelings. Marcus chuckled despite himself. That's good advice, Emma. Maybe I'll try that. But talking about his feelings was the last thing Marcus wanted to do. Instead, he updated his resume and began quietly looking for other job opportunities. The thought of continuing to work closely with Richard and Claire, watching their relationship develop, was more than he could bear. 2 weeks after the bar incident, Richard called Marcus into his office. Close the door, he said, his expression serious. Marcus did as instructed, then stood waiting, his posture stiff. Sit down, Marcus, Richard said, gesturing to the chair across from his desk. I prefer to stand. Richard sighed. Look, I know things have been tense between us lately. I want to clear the air. There's nothing to clear, Marcus replied evenly. You're my boss. I do my job. That's all that matters. Cut the crap, Richard said, his patience visibly thinning. You've been avoiding me for weeks. Is this about Claire? Because if you had feelings for her, you should have said something instead of sulking like a teenager. The accusation ignited Marcus's carefully controlled anger. Said something? Like when you asked me to be your alibi for a fake blind date so you could secretly meet her? Or maybe when you encouraged me to ask her out, knowing full well you were already involved with her? Richard had the grace to look uncomfortable. That was poorly handled on my part. I apologize. Keep your apology, Marcus said coldly. I trusted you. I respected you. I thought you actually cared about me and Emma. I do care.